Hi, this is Julie Pettyjohn. Thank you for dropping in. Recently, I have made several short videos on free motion quilting. I thought that there are some people out there who might like a longer one. In this video, I show you all the fillers and motifs I use to free motion quilt Square Dance, a pattern designed by Charisma Horton. If this video is too long for you, just fast forward to the places that you would like to view. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that, and I need the subscribers. Also, please comment in the comment section below anything that you are looking for and need some help with or instruction, any other things besides free motion quilting that you would like to see. I appreciate it. Now, let's get started. The first thing I thought about was the possibility of putting some big, fluffy, curvy bump back feathers in these diagonal shapes that go around the black and white pinwheels. I have the quilt loaded here at the very top of the quilt, and you can see the blue area. Well, there are a number of these that are repeated in different colors. But I thought those would be really great places to put feathers. And then in the pinwheels, of course, I could imagine something different in each one of those shapes, in the black and in the white. So I decided upon ribbon candy and wishbones, and I did ribbon candy in the blacks, then some wishbones in the whites. I love to stitch in the ditch. I think it just really makes everything crisp and stand out. But on this particular quilt, I decided to do a lot of filler in the two colors of gray and the blacks, not the black pinwheels, but the other black in the background. And I really kind of wanted them to just run into each other then. I didn't want to outline every piece of that where the filler was. So I chose to just outline the pinwheel parts and the diagonals where the feathers are. And then the background part, I just kept those fillers not stitched in those ditches. Now, those were my plans then. So I had the feathers, the wishbones, the ribbon candy all planned out. So I had to decide on my fillers. And I ended up deciding to do swirls in the black part, and in the two gray shades, I would do some rounded circles upon circles, kind of offset circles. So the next thing I had to decide was what colors of thread I would use. So this thread on the left is called granite. That is a glide thread. I decided to use that granite for my fillers. And then the feathers, I wanted to use the same color of the diagonal blocks that were there going around the pinwheels. So I have blue for the blue feathers, celery green for the green feathers, red for the red, and then military gold for the kind of orange gold one. Now, all of those are glide except the blue one, and that is a so fine color. Then I have the black and white for the insides of the pinwheels. So I was going to do a lot of thread changing, and I figured I would just kind of decide as I went whether or not I would advance a quilt and stay with a color, or whether it meant more to me to change that color and stay in my area that I was in, because I generally tend to quilt from top down and left to right. So imagine this. So I'm doing a lot of thread changing, right? So if I'm just going left to right, I'm going to do some, change the thread, do some, change the thread. Well, in some instances, it felt like that was the easier situation for me. And then in some where I had just changed, like say on the pinwheel, I just changed to black to do my outlining and my ribbon candy. And then to turn right around and change, I kind of felt like, gee, that's really quick to be going back and forth between black and white, black and white. So sometimes in that case, I decided to advance the quilt a little bit more to get to all of my spots of black, and then take the quilt back to where I originally started and then do the wishbones. So I hope that makes sense, but in the video I think you'll see them. Let's talk briefly about marking tools. This blue Mark Be Gone marker is one that I really like. They also make a white Mark Be Gone marker, but unfortunately, when I ordered that, it didn't work from the moment I got it. So I went back to my trusty Ultimate marking pencil that is white. Now the only problem with using a water soluble and then an iron off, because the Ultimate marking pencil is an iron off, as you can imagine. So I'm using water to get one off, iron to do another. If you ever do this, make certain that you don't iron before you use your water and get the water soluble off, because the water soluble markers are great, but if you happen to iron them, they're stuck on there, and it's just really hard, maybe impossible to get that out. So be careful with that. I recently was at a Kansas City quilt festival and was super excited when I found these Soline chalk markers. Now the reason I got so excited, they had sample ones open that you could try out there, and I typically really do not like chalk. I like the idea of chalk, but then it never really works for me. I have trouble getting chalk off. It's just that dry, chalky stuff. It's hard to get off. I mean, I know it eventually comes off fully pretty easily, but it just, and the dryness of it just really kind of bothers my hands. But these are like kind of they're not dry and dusty, a little bit more feel of a pen than of chalk. So anyway, I tried them and I just love them. And so I got three. I got one in the blue color, and then the white color, and the pink color. And the reason I got so excited is because I believe that Soline is just a name I can trust. I love their air erasable pens, and so I just had a feeling these were going to be just top notch too, and they have been. They are fabulous. They're my new loves for marking quilts. I didn't do a lot of marking on this quilt. I marked my feathers. Also, this question comes up quite often, when to mark. There are some quilters who lay out their entire quilt and get it marked before they ever load it. I don't do that. I like to mark on when it's on my long arm frame, and so I just mark as I go. And I only marked the feather, not the feathers, but the vines, anyway. So the spines, the spines of my feathers, that's what I marked to give me guidance. Oh my goodness, that is just so much talking. I really strive to not do that much talking, but there I've gone and done it. So it is time now to see some video of free motion quilting. Enjoy. I will make some comments here and there too, but I'll try not to make it too talky. This first little section is just a bit of another video that I already have on my YouTube channel, and it's a little short one of free motion quilting in the round. So I'm not going to put too much of that here, but just to show you that I do always start at the top, and what I'm really striving for here is to keep everything round. I'm going to be doing swirls in the black parts. So instead of doing a more oblong shape like I usually do when I make a similar type shape to this, I wanted to try to make this round to really complement the swirls. For most new free motion quilters who are trying swirls, I think the hard thing in the beginning is to keep the shapes round. At least that's what it was for me. My swirls in the beginning were fairly round, but it was like I had a rounded corner edge to them or something. They weren't total blocks, but they were a little bit squared off. So for a long time, my focus has been just the roundness, just continually thinking, keep them round, keep them round, keep them round. And I mean, I have for years, that's what I've been thinking is keep them round. Now I think I'm trying to really focus on consistency between the lines. Sometimes I'm better at that than other times. I'll be going along and thinking it's doing pretty good, and then they're not so consistent again. So that's still kind of a work in progress for me. So I'm still trying to remember, keep them round, and the consistency of the space between the lines. And then some of mine I go to the left and some to the right. I could have done every single swirl of mine towards the left so that the hook would have been going the same direction. But now it's not so much every other one, but there's a mix there of them going, some going to the left and some going to the right. I think I'm a lot better about that now than I used to be. So those are just some of the things to think about with swirls. Swirls that's a real common design that a lot of quilters use and a lot of quilters love, but it can be a difficult one to get every little bit of it down. Keep it round. Try to go for some consistency in spacing apart of your stitch lines, and vary now and then between going to the left and going to the right. Sometimes I do my swirls on the cruise setting on regulated. So the manual that I'm using here is not a regulated stitch. So I'm having to go pretty slow to keep these from being really giant stitches. I would prefer to turn my speed up, but at this time I was having trouble with my machine and I was having some thread shredding, especially anytime I would go above the speed of 850 when I was on the non-regulated manual speed. So occasionally I will put it on regulated and on cruise. I keep it on regulated and change it to precision for when I've got rulers down. So those are the 3 settings I have on my machine, and that's how I generally use them. Here are a few photographs of some of the feathers that I did in the blue section. In this video, I will show you some bump back feathers in action. And here we are with the video of some feathers in the red section. Starting at the top of the red section, I have already drawn my line for my feather spine. Now, if you're new to feathers, you first need to know the anatomy of a feather the spine, and then we call the feather, the part I just made here, the plume. Okay, and then there are so many types of feathers that you can do. That's really the neat thing about feathers. They're impressive, but they're easy. And the bump back feather that I'm doing here is more of a formal feather, I believe. Now I'm going to, on this quilt, I've echoed around the plumes on the outside, and I don't very often do that, but I chose to do it here. There are so many ways you can do bump back feathers, and there are so many types of feathers you can do besides bump back. So they're called bump back because you come around and then you have to travel on the bump again. Now here's a little tip. When you're on the inside of a curve, if you're doing a curvy spine, sometimes I don't have a lot of room right in there, so as you can see, what I like to do is on that last big plume, I like to make some smaller plumes just kind of sitting on it. Now the real trick here though, for them to look real, is they must touch the plume right before it. So not just the one it's sitting on, but it needs to curve around and just at one point touch that previous plume. So that is a big tip. It just doesn't look right if you don't do that. Now here I am echoing. Now the thing about these feathers, it's in such a large space that I'm having to do them in sections. And that may seem a little daunting because it's like, well, how do I connect them? It's really so much easier than it might seem. But you do have to know where your throat space ends so that you don't all of a sudden get a straight line, and do a good stop so that when you advance you can connect. Now I just choose to do one side at a time. You can do a plume on one side and a plume on another and rotate them. I like to do one side and then another. I don't normally do what I did here, which I went up the right side on one side and then up the kind of the opposing side. I usually do the right side and then the opposite left side. Here's another tip. I never look at my other side. Like here I'm on the left side of my spine. I will not look at the right side of my spine while I'm making these. I don't want to have that interfere in my brain and make me want to match it. I'm not concerned at all about matching because you're dealing with other things here. You're on an opposite side of the curve. So I try to not even look over there. And then at some point I come down my spine. There are some people who like to stitch their spine first. That's the very first thing they do for a feather. I don't. I just do it at some point. When I first started doing feathers, I would stitch up one side, then come down the spine, then stitch up the other side. And now I just kind of do what's easier. If I want to do some echoes before I go down the spine, I do. So I just don't always do it in the same order. But I do always stitch the spine. I just don't do that as the first thing. I prefer to mark my spine. And then I stitch my plumes and stitch my spine. And then I will spray with water with just a little touch of baking soda in that water. I have a bottle of water and baking soda beside my long arm, and I spray the quilt, and that makes the water soluble marks go away. So here I am echoing. Also, just you can go any direction you want in this particular quilt. And the way I have the feathers going diagonally and then meeting up, at points at the top and at the bottom. I I started at my top point and I did them, what kind of looks upside down to you, right? And here you can see the other sides of the green. So they look like they're flowing towards the bottom. Then when I get to the center of it, I change directions. I work from the bottom up and then have them kind of come together. Okay, now I'm moving away from the feather and I am heading over to one of the pinwheels, and you can watch and see how I go stitch in the ditch and then make my 1/4 inch mark and do a little ribbon candy and wishbones. I'm ready to do another section of my feathers in this red block area. I like to mark my spines first. Quite often I will mark them just freehand. I don't really need a ruler because the spine that I'm marking is just a guideline anyway. But in this case, I have chosen to use this ruler that has curves because I'm doing several feathers in a similar way on the same quilt, and I want them to all have some consistency. However, I'm not at all worried that I need to measure anything. I don't. A couple of times I put a ruler out to give me a little mark as to where the center area was on these kind of border blocks, but mostly I can even eyeball that. The ruler I'm using, some areas are used for marking, others are used for stitching, and in this case it doesn't really matter what size I'm getting, what shape I'm getting. It's just what I want it to look like. So when you know if you want your spine to look really curvy or if you want it straighter, just pick up something you have that has the shape that you want to use. It's not a measurement tool, as I've said. It's just to give you something that is a guideline. Now, this is a real important reason why I do not stitch my spine. I've seen some quilters who the very first thing they do is stitch their spine. I do not like to do that because this is only a guideline. If I'm stitching along and my plume doesn't quite fall where I've marked the spine, that's not a problem for me if I haven't stitched it yet, because I'm going to just spray this with a water bottle and remove these lines that I'm putting on. No one will ever know where I intended for things to fall. They'll just see where they did come. So I'm just wanting my basic shape. I don't always hit the line exactly. But anyway, this is what really works for me.